His hands held the little bundle in his arms as if it would break as soon as he would loosen up. October had arrived, accompanied by winds strong enough to tear branches of trees and have roof tiles shatter into thousands of pieces after being yanked from their foundations. The cape held dew and the bundle warm as another gush of wind and tiny wet raindrops rushed over them, and the large open field of the training area which had been restored to its original purpose. He regretted not having chosen the bench standing before the storage building for waiting. Perhaps it would have blocked the wind from escaping strands of his whitening hair from the short ponytail he wore under the blue hood. The blowing took the clashing of metal on metal before him with it, as well as the shouts exchanged by the two men. Their mouths opened and closed, but not a sound was to be heard, yet their faces revealed their mutual delight, even though one tended to be the one suffering from the training battle. The armor the man wore was already stained with mud and grass, but at least almost all of his blood had stayed within his body, while the other, who had refused protection, showed signs of wounds on his sturdy arms and hairy legs. The sudden touch to his neck startled Dew, fleshy and wet and small. It took him a moment to remember the bundle to be more than just a heavy filled cloth. It was alive and apparently had just awoken. His eyes searched for those of the armored man, but he was in a tricky situation with his sword far out of his reach and the other one's hands tightly holding onto his shoulders. Dew readjusted the cape to go further around his torso before he stood up and made his way towards the two. When the attacking one noticed the casual viewer approaching, he immediately let go of his victim and stepped aside. It took the young man a moment to get to his feet, the weight of the armor clearly limiting him in his mobility, and when he did, his hands reached for several straps which he undid with ease to have the plates fall to the ground. His smile, as sweet as honey, melted Dew's heart in an instant as he stretched out his arms to receive the lively bundle. "I might have lost both the tournament and the battle, but I see this as more than a victory," the man exclaimed as he held it against his dirty shirt. A set of small hands reached out from it, touching his nose. Dew still couldn't believe Josephine had trusted him with the responsibility over this tiny creature. It had been a short time. Still, the way from the castle to her husband could have been far enough for something bad to happen. Luckily it had gone well, and now Patrick was holding his newborn daughter. Anna, they had called her those 2 weeks ago. The hairy man frowned in surprise and gently boxed Patrick against the shoulder while encouraging, "Third place isn't that bad for a city soldier, right?" "I moved units. I'm a royal soldier now," he corrected Jonah. "I wouldn't go as far as saying you really are one yet. You lack the experience." "Then what are you?" he chuckled. "A newbie who can talk all of you metal tins," Jonah replied confidently, to which the father laughed. "I guess you could say that, but have you ever fought Stuart? He's a block of iron, taking hits and doesn't hold back in swinging. Damien is threatening as well, maybe of similar strength at Avery." He had successfully caught Jonah's attention, who immediately leaned forward, demanding to know, "Where can I find this Stewart person?" "I don't know. The man rarely shows up outside of work. Who knows what he's up to?" Patrick soon left, fearing his daughter might catch a cold during the rough weather, so Jonah and Dew ended up completely alone on the far side. The hybrid gestured Dew to follow him. Against his guess, they went towards the direction of the lake again. Dew couldn't imagine the man attempting to go for a swim at this point. Even Jonah wasn't invincible to sickness. The sharp sniffing he did from time to time was a reminder of the little cold he had caught a couple of weeks prior. "If you're aiming for the lake, we'd have to go left," Dew commented after missing the path of the road fork. "Why on earth would I go there? It'd be freezing. No, we're going to a lovely clearing just 100 meters further up the hill." "And then?" "I got a thing there." Jonah didn't bother to elaborate further. The lovely clearing he had mentioned wasn't much more than a treeless opening mostly overgrown with harmless nettles. His frequent visits could be seen by the clear path of destruction Jonah had left with his hooves. Broken stems, torn leaves, and wide, flattened areas with 1 or 2 hoof prints barely visible could be found everywhere. "There, that's my masterpiece," Jonah then exclaimed from in front of Dew, while pointing his arms at an area of white trees before him. Only then did Dew notice one of them as being particularly strange. A circle had been carved into the dark-colored bark, revealing the lighter surface underneath. The area, which was supposed to be smooth and lively, showed scars of past abuses with deep cuts everywhere. A white hand placed itself on Dew's back, and before he could react he was being pushed forwards under Jonah's arm, who began to casually lean on him. Dew blew his nose as soon as he smelled the stench of the boar's sweat, which he didn't seem to notice. At least he had cleanly shaved his beard off. "You told me you know a thing or two about throwing knives, right?" Jonah recalled, while his free hand began to reach for Dew's to open it up and place something inside of them. "Then show me what those hands can do, fishy." The smaller one flinched at the sudden mention of the nickname given to him by a completely different person. Yes, perhaps Jonah and Dew could be considered friends, but that didn't allow him to use said name. He was let go to be able to move freely. There were about 3 knives in his palm, their surface tainted and a little dull. "I don't know. I haven't done this in quite a while, and I mostly need a couple of throws to get the hang of it." "Don't stress yourself. We got time, don't we? Your shift starts in more than an hour." Dew stood on the same spot, unsure how to start. Jonah's hand shot forward to obtain one of the metal objects in a hurry and threw it in the direction of the poor tree. It didn't even stick to the low area it had hit and fell to the ground with a soft rustling. "Your turn," he encouraged and forced Dew to switch positions with him. The light-haired one blew out air in a sigh and lifted the knife. Jonah lightly clapped his hands together when it bored itself into the bark shortly under the stripped part. "Not bad, not bad." "That was bad, though. I missed by a lot," Dew replied disappointedly. He offered the next throw to Jonah, but he insisted on having Dew go again. This time he barely made it to the border, and Jonah tried to whistle, but spat in Dew's direction instead. The boar went to retrieve the throwable objects before Dew could comment on the failed attempt. Then he tried his luck again, yet even though he managed to hit the target, the knife never stayed. At some point Jonah grew so infuriated he took the knife in his fist, rushed towards the poor tree and manually stabbed it. So that was what had happened before. Dew, on the other hand, got better with every throw. The center was far from his reach, still, so Jonah commented, if it were a person it would be bleeding like a bitch for sure. "Ever tried a bow? I bet you'd suck with a bow." "I can handle a bow," the bower boasted, which won a smirk out of Dew. He had managed to outdo the berserk in one category, and now the man was trying to have himself feel better about his loss. "What?" he said as he noticed the face. "Nothing," Dew replied innocently. "Oh, don't be so pleased with yourself. He paused. "Forget it, you beat me." "I wasn't trying to," Dew shrugged it off. "That makes it even worse." Jonah threw his hands into the air, which had Dew chuckle a little. "Are you sure you haven't trained lately?" Jonah asked while trying his luck once more, yet failing miserable. "There wasn't all that much time. Alba called for me more in my free time. Not much lately, though, but still, job's busy." And why is that?" "Company," Dew guessed. By now the painting of her and her mother had almost been finished, and with the casual correction of Avery, the picture became close to what Sue described as being as real as possible. Why the dragon hybrid, as Alba's new patron, knew the girl's face so well was a mystery to all. There were several times where Alba had warned him to stay away, though, because her father visited from time to time. Those visits had not become more frequent, but Dew still hoped they would cease eventually. Maybe there was shame within the man. Even though Avery saw him with Alba, she barely talked but insisted she was fine with it, commanding Dew to listen to Alba. "I get it. I'd also call you if I were a rich brat dancing around in my silly little costume all day long," Jonah said. Dew's eye twitched. "Stick that opinion somewhere else, sir. That girl has more political intellect than half of the people surrounding her," he defended Alba. "That's not surprising. The higher-ups are idiots. Imagine getting all fed up just because one little blonde guy doesn't bow every time he gets the food to stuff into their fat bellies. What I'm saying is, despite the way she was raised, she has some common sense as well as empathy, which reminds me to visit the graveyard tomorrow." "Sure," Jonah replied, as if his approval was needed. With the knife back in his hand, he strutted over to Dew and laid his hand on his shoulder. "Here," he said, handing him the weapons. "You can have them for the week if you want to." "Are you sure? I I do want them back at some point to master this skill, but let them be your entertainment for now, he insisted, his unsettling eyes staring deep into Dew's soul. A shudder went through him. Hesitantly, but somewhat excited, Dew took them and stored them in a makeshift pouch he had stitched onto the inside of the cape. "Let's go back, shall we?" he then suggested. "One more thing." Dew forced himself not to jolt back when the other one's hand went towards his neck and pulled out the necklace once again. The stone was a slightly duller pink, but not empty and grey like it tended to be whenever Avery was gone for a while. "He's gotten a lot weaker, hasn't he?" Jonah guessed. "I can't tell, I barely see him," Dew revealed while his gaze slipped off to the side. "I have a hypothetical question for you." "No, I don't support the idea of killing him," he immediately replied, his body tensing up. No. What if he dies before your 5th year is up? Will you look for his brother?" Dew's hand went to take back the crystal and put it in place. "I think so, and if it's just for him to know the kind of torture Avery went through to find him." "If that hypothetical scenario were to take place, would you go alone?" "You're suggesting to accompany me," the Merling figured. "Yeah, so would you let me?" he confirmed. Jonah's hand was still resting on Dew's body, numbing his flesh. He felt nauseous. "Why not?" His mouth spoke without his consent. "Yeah, why not? I think it would be very beneficial for you to have someone like me on your side." "Why's that?" "By then you'll be a full Merling, pretty dangerous, right? And I know how to sustain myself," Jonah explained himself, to which the other replied, "And so do I, but whatever. I'd let you be my company, but it'll never get that far." "Why?" The question was teasing, hurting like one of the knives in his hand as if they stuck to his guts. "Because he'll make it," Jonah simply whispered. Jonah's expression immediately switched from content amusement to annoyed worry. The crystal represents his present energy level. The god inside him figured it to be funny to have rocks glow whenever he's around, and look at it now. It's been a little over a month, and it changed more than your whole appearance did in the same time span. He'll die for sure. Dew's lips twisted into a thin line while his eyes were still staring downwards. Unsuspectedly, Jonah's hands tightly closed around Dew's upper arms and pulled him towards his face. The Merling didn't want to breathe, fearing to touch the other one whose fingers were already digging into his flesh. He couldn't get away, even if he would have wanted to. "I know you'd rather have it that way, so do I, but think realistically. There's nothing we can do to elongate that time. He will only suffer more, and so will you if you keep on holding on to him that much. Please, consider to be an at least possible scenario to protect yourself from a full heartbreak," he urged, his voice smooth as if to twist the other one's mind, lure him away and hallucinate. Dew had gone fully numb, his head barely comprehending a word the Boer had just said. He cocked his head and stared into the freezing eyes, which were filled with worry. Or was it something else? He swore he could see a flash of light in those pupils. Dew's hand moved upwards as if attached to a string. His palm touched Jonah's shoulder, which was exposed by the sleeveless top. Why was he doing that? That wasn't like him. His fingers closed. His mind was as if in a trance, and active feelings for his own body still hadn't returned. Jonah broke eye contact to glance at the pale bandaged hand, seemingly startled by the random act. Dew felt the hands around his upper arm slightly loosening up, but not enough for him to fall over from the slightly bent back position while the Boer was looking at him from above. The seconds passed by slowly. Still the man didn't react, but kept staring at his opposite's hand as if hypnotized until mechanically locking onto his face again. An eerie feeling built up inside Dew's mind, yet he couldn't get himself to move or speak. He hadn't even muttered his reply to the last statement yet. Dew's hand had sunken down to lay against his own chest, heart wanting to pound heavily but unable to. Without a warning or even a hint, one of Jonah's hands tightened up again, going downward, while the other shot over Dew's back towards the back of his head, where it buried itself in the light hair. Reaching the height of his belt, the other hand let go of his arm to grab him by the waist and pull him towards his own broader body, where Jonah held him without leaving much room for movement. Dew felt himself unable to breathe. being enclosed between the uneven ground, dirt covering his body, and Jonah's chest from above didn't enable him to breathe after they had lost balance the moment Jonah had loosened from his stupor. And then there were the hybrid's broad lips pressing down on him, taking even the last bit of chance for him to gasp for oxygen. His mind twirled as if being sucked into a whirlpool, being drowned and damned to slowly lose consciousness the longer he spent in it. He subconsciously knew he lost it once Jonah's surprisingly gentle fingers started caressing the skin of his neck, shoulders, and chest. And Dew didn't stop it.